And I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to get out of Chicago area. And I've done a lot of traveling, but I wanted to go somewhere to study music that was not, the Midwest.
Yeah.
And it was a great fit because I'm half French and I lived with French roommates. I got to connect more with my French heritage, even though I'm not from, my family's not from Quebec. But it was really special to be in that city for those couple years and meet people from all over.
Hey, everybody, it's Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, ChicagoJazz.com, and welcome to another episode of Around Town. Today, we've got Lara Driscoll on. She's a piano player in town, which I'm sure many of you know and have heard of her, but maybe you haven't seen her perform live, but she is doing a live performance March 10th. Actually, she's doing two live performances with her two different groups. It's kind of a double album release here in Chicago. The recordings came out a little bit before the pandemic hit, so this is actually the official releases here in Chicago. It's going to be a Constellation March 10th, 3111 North Western Avenue. Of course, it's constellation-chicago.com. It's all linked up down below. Lara, welcome to the show. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about this. Now, you've got the group, Lara Driscoll Trio, and then you also have Firm Roots, which is a duo between you and your husband, Chris White. But let's tackle the Lara Driscoll Trio first and talk a little bit about this, because the recording's Woven Dreams, and I remember listening to it when it first came out a couple of years ago, and I kind of revisited it a little bit, and I remember there's some standards on there, but there's also some original compositions. So talk about how you went about the process of deciding, okay, I'm going to actually put a trio together and start writing for it, because that's a different switch from a lot of people that are just playing regularly and they're playing standards and they're getting better and they're getting tight with their trio. The compositional aspect of the whole thing is always something that fascinates me, because that's another animal to take on.
Yeah, it's a culmination of a lot of years of work, actually, that album. Years in Urbana-Champaign, where I was as an undergrad, working out, different ideas. That was more the time where I spent more time working on the standards and the arrangements of the standards that made it to the album. And then also the compositions that I did while I was living in Montreal. So I recorded the album in Montreal with a trio that I met while living there, Dave Lang on drums and Paul Rushka on bass. And we played together a lot, and I wanted to capture that moment in time. And so we did that recording right around the time when I was finishing my master's in Montreal. And then I moved to Chicago and, started working and right away got really busy. And so it wasn't until a little bit later that I actually had a chance to go back and mix and master and do all the steps that it takes to actually put out a record. So
Well,
yeah, it was a big project.
well, yeah, I know all about, starting from scratch and going, but I don't write music. So that's another animal. But talk a little bit, because I know you went to U of I, you went to the jazz studies program down there, got your bachelor's. And then why did you decide to go to Montreal to get your master's in jazz? Because that isn't the normal spot. Most people say, hey, let's go to Montreal for jazz.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Montreal is a draw. It's such an amazing city. The bilingual aspect, the love for the arts, it's very supportive for artists in general in Canada, as many people know, but specifically Montreal. And I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to get out of Chicago area, and I've done a lot of traveling, but I wanted to go somewhere to study music that was not, the Midwest.
Yeah.
And it was a great fit because I'm half French and, I lived with French roommates. I got to connect more with my French heritage, even though I'm not from, my family's not from Quebec. But it was really special to be in that city for those couple years and meet people from all over. It's a very cosmopolitan city, so the influences are slightly different and vast. So
Talk a little bit about this recording. Okay, Woven Dreams, the Lara Driscoll Trio. Of course, laradriscoll.com. It's all linked up down below. I encourage everybody to go check it out. Um, there's some standards on there, but then also remembering back and then looking at it, you've got like a suite on there. You've got
Yeah.
different things like Siblings is on there. You've got Airport, Limbo. I'm assuming that these are all experiences that happened
Yeah.
to you. But what's the Black Dog? What is it? Skirts Away or something like that.
Yeah. So, so when I was young in New York City for the first time with some friends, I got to see Fred Hirsch perform at the Village Vanguard, and it was right after he got out of his coma, and so it was the first performance that he did post coma, and it was his trio plus two group, and it was one of the most incredible performances I'd ever seen. And I was just blown away. I'd never been to the Vanguard either. So that was just remarkable. And then I got to talk to him a little bit afterwards, and then later bought his book of compositions and really got into that album. And so there's this composition that he wrote called Black Dog Pays a Visit, and it's about depression and the struggle with depression. And so this was sort of the suite that you referenced, Forgiving Black Dog Skirts Away, is a response to that composition and some of the harmonic ideas, but also just the emotions around it.
It's always interesting to me because, when I talk to different musicians that are writing, that are composing music, that are arranging music, and it's not lyrical music, so it's like you're taking a theme and you're building a theme and you're taking it from start to finish and telling a story through music. It's always interesting to me where they come up with the ideas. So I'm glad you explained that, because it makes total sense now, and it's very interesting to me. But when somebody takes an idea, a musical idea, a theme, a melody, and takes it to the next, start to finish, how they come up with a title for that sometimes. And I know some of it's inspiration, but like for an example, Siblings, right? You've got Siblings. I'm assuming it's probably because you have siblings, and that's what it's written about. I'm not that stupid. I am a drummer here, but that's all I can. But coming up with a melody. I mean, is there something that you look back and say, you know what, and you have a remembrance of something that happened between you and your siblings, and say, okay, and then you remember whether it was chaotic, whether it was peaceful, whether it was solemn, whatever it was, and then you write a melody around that, and that's how you come up with the title for it and the whole theme for it?
It depends. Yeah. I mean, with the case of Siblings, it's actually written for my nephew Drake. And he was born literally as I was finishing the composition. So it was sort of a reflection on my relationship with my brother, and then also his son, who was my first nephew. So yeah, that one just sort of was the timing and the emotions around becoming an aunt. But it's funny you say, how do you choose titles? Because Woven Dreams, the composition, is actually the first composition I wrote like in a jazz style. And I submitted it for the Luminarts composition competition at that time, and it was called Union League at that time. But I'll never forget Bob Ojeda, the trumpet player, saying, I love your composition, but nobody will remember it if it doesn't have a title. Because at the time it was called Untitled, because I hadn't named it yet. And it was such a sweet and supportive way of saying, like, you got to name your tunes. And so, for example, with that one, I thought a lot about, the time period in which I wrote it and the influences at the time. It's something that is really special in relation to a mentor I had in undergrad, Chip Stevens. He helped me with the composition and just with my playing so much. And so it's sort of a reflection on that relationship.
Yeah, and I forgot about that, but you did participate in the Luminarts competition. I think you won a scholarship, or you won some sort of what
Yeah.
is it called? A scholarship? Is that what it's called, or a grant?
It's changed over the years,
Yeah.
but yeah. So Bob Ojeda was one of the people I met through that, and he was very supportive of my writing in particular.
Yeah, well, and he's also a Chicago legend for those of you that
Yeah.
don't know who he is. He's actually somebody that arranged and played with the Count Basie band, and incredible amounts of other musicians. So it was always great because he was able to judge along with some other professionals on that panel. And it's still going. And by the way, they're reaching out again because 2023's Lumen Arts Society is coming back up. So watch chicagojazz.com for more info on that. Now, you are playing double duty on this because you also have another group that you're playing with, of course, another person, we should say, Firm Roots, who's your husband, Chris White, the piano player in town who I've known for many years, and that's how I know you so well as well. But so anyway, so you're making Chris White actually work at this gig with you. He can't just sit in the audience, so that's good. But talk about Firm Roots. So Firm Roots is your duo, and you guys, I mean, obviously you guys have played together for many years, just without recording. But how did the recording of Firm Roots come up, and what's the meaning behind the name of the group?
So the recording was released in January of 2021, and it's an exciting moment for us, being that we've been playing together for many years, but never actually formally made our duo a band. And so we finally decided to spend more time composing. We'd spent a lot of time playing tunes together, and so we worked on a lot how to compose together, and also just the roles of the piano in a duo setting and how we share those roles and how we rotate some of the responsibilities. It's really different from playing with a bass player with a rhythm section, and so it's been fun exploring that together. We finally have our pianos next to each other, so that helps to get to play together. But the duo is named after the composition Firm Roots, the Cedar Walton tune, which we love Cedar Walton, and Chris in particular, but both of us love nature. He's really into gardening in the last few years, and it connects with the ideas of having strong roots in family, in relationships, and also in the history of the music. I think that's something that we both value a great deal, even if we're writing our own music and influenced by modern music. We really have some deep affinity for the history and some of the influences that we had really early on. So we share a connection in that way as well.
Are you guys writing music together for
Yeah.
this? I mean, so you guys sit down and you guys actually write music together? Because I'm married and I don't think we would agree on chord changes, let alone the melody or anything else, if I was working on something like this with my wife. Just so you guys have a very special relationship if you're actually getting things done.
Well, we do take turns. It's interesting, to work with another piano player because harmony is what our focus so often in that instrument. But we'll take turns. Like often, Chris will start in the morning really early because he's a morning person, and then I will, work late at night, and we'll take turns kind of shaping the composition. One of us will start it, and then the other one will continue, and then at the end we'll kind of reflect on what's there, and then make final call decisions together. And also it changes how the composition sounds when we play it together, because we might add more texture than we could if it was just solo piano.
Well, and that's similar, and that even leads back to your trio too. And you can come up with a theme, you come up with an idea, you come up with a structure of a tune, but when you get in there and you start collaborating, whether it's with a trio, whether it's with Chris on another piano, that's the whole point of this, right? Is because you guys, then you take everybody's ideas and they can take your idea and expand it and make it even better. I mean, I'm a big believer in that. It's almost like the mastermind program that they talk about in business that I'm a big believer in. But you take good ideas, but that's why you want to work with certain people, because you want to get their ideas, right? So that it expands your themes and expands what you're trying to do to make the massive amount of creativity as possible.
Absolutely. And we have different strengths. I mean, I think in many situations that's the case, and different perspectives. Like I'm more detail oriented and Chris is more big picture. So it's kind of a good combination when we're thinking about the overall product, to have both perspectives.
All right, so let's send everybody over. So we've got Constellation-Chicago.com, 3111 Northwestern Avenue in Chicago. the double release party on March 10th, right up there. Starts at 8:30. Is that right? Or is it a little earlier? It's 8:30, right?
8:30.
Okay, 8:30. Everything's linked up below. And I encourage everybody to go check out both recordings. You can get them at laradriscoll.com. It is linked up down below as well. And by the way, it's worth going to check out Firm Roots just for the album cover, because the artwork on the album cover, there's gardening, there's trees, there's people looking at Chris is watering things. It's great. I encourage
Maplewood Photography. I have to give a plug to Maplewood Photography.
Awesome.
Diego is incredible.
Yeah, it's awesome. So go check that out, and congratulations on everything, Lara. It's
Thank
great
you
to
so
connect
much.
with you. And we'll see everybody March 10th over at Constellation. And of course, thanks to everybody for watching. As usual, as I always say, all things Chicago Jazz on chicagojazz.com. And until next time, hopefully I will see someone out on the scene.